Picture this. It's 1946. The war is over, and in a quiet little border town called Texarkana, people are finally starting to feel a sense of peace again. But that peace, it's about to be completely shattered.
Just listen to that. That's the very first description we ever get of this attacker. It comes from Mary Jean Larrey, one of the few people who actually survived him. And that image, a white mask, just holes for the eyes and mouth, a flashlight and a pistol. I mean, that's the stuff of nightmares. It's an image that would literally burn itself into the memory of the entire town.
And for 10 terrifying weeks, that's exactly what happened. One single shadowy figure held this town in an absolute grip of fear. The attacks were so brutal, so shocking, that they quickly got a name, the Moonlight Murders. And in the process, they created a legend that, believe it or not, is still alive and well today.
So let's get into it. A spring of terror. It all went down over just one spring. A series of attacks, each one more violent than the last, all targeting young couples. You know, these secluded lovers' lanes, places that were supposed to be about romance. They were turned into scenes of just unimaginable horror.
Just look at this timeline. It happened so fast. February 22nd, the first attack. Then, about a month later, March 24th, the first murders. April 14th, another double murder. And then May 3rd, the final murder. I mean, we're talking just over 2 months. In that tiny window of time, an entire town went from feeling perfectly safe to being completely paralyzed with fear.
Okay, so the first attack. This really set the stage. You've got Jimmy Hollis and Mary Jean Larrey. They're on a secluded lover's lane after a movie, and this guy just appears. Jimmy gets his skull fractured, really badly, and Mary Jean is sexually assaulted with the barrel of the attacker's gun. It's just horrific. But, and this is incredible, they both miraculously survived. Police at the time, they kind of thought it was a one-off, a really brutal but random act of violence. But about a month later, any thought of this being a random attack just vanished. Richard Griffin and Polly Ann Moore are found murdered in their car on another lover's lane. Both of them shot in the head, and police find a key piece of evidence. The weapon was a .32 caliber Colt pistol. Remember that because it's going to be really important.
And then came the third attack. This is where all doubt was just erased. Paul Martin and Betty Jo Booker. His body is found by a road, hers almost 2 miles away. She was only 15, a talented saxophone player, and they were both shot with that same .32 caliber Colt pistol. Now the police knew. This wasn't random. The pattern was undeniable. Texarkana had a serial killer on the loose. So just when everyone thought they had a handle on this guy's pattern, young couples on lovers' lanes, he completely changes it up. The killer moves from the darkness of the woods to a quiet farmhouse. He attacks an older couple, Virgil and Katie Starks. Virgil is shot and killed right through a window while he's just sitting there reading his newspaper. Katie is shot twice in the face, but amazingly, she manages to escape and get help. This was the Phantom's last known attack. And then, poof, he was gone.
All right, so now the town is in a full-blown panic. A massive manhunt gets underway. But the thing is, they weren't just hunting a man, they were hunting a phantom.
And that's where he gets the name, right? The Phantom Killer. It was actually coined by the local media. See, unlike guys like the Zodiac Killer, this person never sent letters, never claimed a title, never tried to communicate. He didn't have to. The town's own fear, fueled by the newspapers, built the legend all on its own.
You have to remember, this was the 1940s. Forensics, super limited. The investigation was just completely overwhelmed. They questioned more than 400 suspects. They even brought in this legendary Texas Ranger, a guy named M.T. Lone Wolf Gonzalez. But nothing was working. And the town itself was on edge. I mean, people were arming themselves, boarding up their homes. The fear was so thick you could cut it with a knife. That small town trust, it was just gone.
So even with this massive investigation, the case was never officially solved. But over the years, 2 main suspects have really dominated the conversation. And we're going to look at the case against both of them, even though, and this is key, neither one was ever actually convicted of the murders. So here they are. On one hand, you've got Ewell Swinney, a known career criminal. On the other, H.B. Tennyson, who was a troubled student. 2 very different people, but the cases for and against each of them are, well, they're both compelling and honestly just frustratingly incomplete.
Let's start with Ewell Swinney. The police really thought he was their guy. The evidence against him, while circumstantial, was really strong. First off, he's a known car thief and counterfeiter. His own wife, Peggy, at one point actually told police that he did it. When he was arrested, he made some really suspicious comments, like asking if he was going to get the chair. A car stolen on the night of one of the murders was traced back to his wife, and, get this, he had recently sold a .32 Colt pistol, the exact same caliber as the murder weapon.
So with all that, you're probably wondering, why wasn't he ever charged with murder? Well, here's the frustrating part. His wife, Peggy, who was the star witness, refused to testify against him in court. And because of the laws back then, she couldn't be forced to. Without her testimony, the whole case against him for murder just collapsed. He got sent to prison for other crimes, but not for the killings.
Okay, so that brings us to our second suspect, H.B. Tennyson. And this is where things get really strange. In 1948, 2 years after the murders just stopped, Tennyson took his own life. And he left behind a suicide note with this chilling line. "Yes, I did kill Betty Jo Booker and Paul Martin." I mean, that sounds like a confession, right?
Well, here's the thing. Was it really a clear confession? Or was this just the words of a deeply troubled mind? Because investigators found another note at the scene that seemed to deny his involvement. So what do you do with that? This contradiction has fueled the debate for decades. Was he the Phantom, or was he just a disturbed kid? We just don't know.
So with no convictions, no definitive answers, the Phantom's identity stayed a complete mystery. And in that vacuum, where facts should have been, a legend started to grow. This horrifying local event transformed into a piece of genuine American folklore.
And a huge part of that folklore is thanks to the 1976 movie, The Town That Dreaded Sundown. You might have seen it. It's a classic horror flick, but here's the deal. It takes massive liberties with the truth, like the killer using a trombone with a knife on it. Totally made up. The weapon was a pistol. A lot of the details about the victims were changed, so much so that one of the families actually sued the filmmakers. It's largely fictionalized, but man, it really cemented the myth of the Phantom in people's minds.
And you know, while the legend and the movie are fascinating to talk about, we have to remember what this is really about. It's about this number, 5. 5 people were murdered, 5 lives cut short, with their families never ever getting justice.
And this isn't just some local ghost story we're talking about. The Texas Department of Public Safety themselves have called this the #1 unsolved murder case in Texas history. I mean, think about that. In a state as big as Texas, with all its history, this is #1. That tells you just how significant this case really is. But maybe the most bizarre, most chilling part of this whole legacy is how the town of Texarkana deals with it today. Every single Halloween, they screen that fictional horror movie in Spring Lake Park, the actual site of one of the murders. It's this strange, almost unsettling tradition where a community confronts its darkest chapter year after year. So in the end, it's a story without a final chapter. A killer who just emerged from the shadows for 10 weeks, created absolute terror, and then vanished back into them forever. And it leaves us all with that one lingering question. After nearly 80 years, will the Phantom's true face ever really be known?